of different ways of getting onto web forms. And that is actually going to be pretty important. Okay, I know it at first it seems, hey, like, you know, easy. I'm just going to go over to my tools and click on WebForms 2019, and it just takes me where I need to go, right? So as we let this load, it will just bring us right into our WebForms account. However, there is just one really important note that I want to make about that, just so you understand what is actually happening on the back end when you log in this way. Okay, and why it's so relevant is because this login is going to bring you to everything that relates to your Kriya web forms for your Oakville Milton credentials. Because I was on the OMDREB matrix, this is my OMDREB web forms. Okay, and that's really specific. And the reason why I'm saying it that way is because being that a lot of our OMDREB members are actually dual members or members of multiple boards. In a lot of cases, a dual member of OMDREB and TREB, for example. Well, what will inevitably happen in that case is that you have two different logins for web forms. Okay, when you sign up as a membership, we send your credentials to Kriya. They create a profile for your web forms. The same thing happens when you apply to be a member of TREB. As soon as they do your membership, they send your information to Kriya and create a profile. So it does inevitably mean that you have two separate web forms accounts. Even though you're one user, you do have two separate web forms accounts and they don't communicate with each other. Okay? So whenever you log in, just kind of choose the one that you would like to continue with. And then moving forward, it's easy. You just kind of stick to the same one, but you do kind of have to make that differentiation just so you understand. Like if I create a transaction here on my Oakville credentials, and then I go to the TREB website, I go to membership, and I click WebForms 2019, right? I wouldn't see it on that end because the two portals or the two profiles just don't communicate with each other. They're like, in Kriya's eyes, you're two completely different profiles. Okay. So let me see here. I'm just going to hit log out so that I can show you what this, because as you see here on my screen, I have a realtor link on here, right? This is where you would choose, right, your board or association. If I was a Toronto Real Estate Board member or maybe a Guelph member or anything like that, right, I might choose that from the drop down and put in my username and password, which was just OMID and password. Just know that you do, I know it could cause some confusion, but just understand you may have more than one. If you're not seeing the transaction that you're expecting to be there, you might just have to log into your other credentials. Okay, so if I logged into TREB and I didn't see like all of my transactions that I had been working on the previous week, probably means that I accidentally went into TREB when I meant to go into OMDREB, and I can just choose Oakville Milton and actually use my OMID and password for Matrix or for Ortis to kind of log in and get where I need to be. Okay. First, long-winded soapbox about web forms, but I just want to make sure everyone understands that because it could cause some questions and confusion. But once you're here and you're on the new Kriya web forms platform, hopefully this does look a little familiar. I'm hoping that everybody had a chance to go on to this and have a look through. What I have planned for the agenda today, okay, we're definitely going to tackle a couple of key points here on this member dashboard. Okay, this is your landing page when you enter the WebForms program, right? We're going to talk about these icons up on the top right, especially this legacy version, where I'll show you what I think is the easiest way to save some of the information if you do have some transaction kits on the old version of WebForms. So we'll have a quick look at that. As soon as we're finished up with the dashboard, I will go through and point out a couple of important items on this left-hand side, especially things like the App Store and talking about this Authentisign pen. Okay, so I'll go through some options on the left here, and right after that, we're going to jump into an actual transaction we'll just create a really quick one where we can add something pretty general. We're just going to add an agreement of purchase and sale, maybe an OMDREB form 100, where eventually we're just adding some clauses to understand the formatting, and then what it looks like when you send that form through to your third-party signing. Okay, so that pretty much will wrap up the whole hour once we go through those topics. Absolutely feel free to ask some questions throughout, but just so you have an idea of kind of where I'm planning to go. But here we are on the member dashboard. So let's start with the different things that you definitely want to know about this. Okay, so much like Matrix, if you have been playing around with it a little bit, something you'll notice about Matrix is that your dashboard that you have on there, or your home screen, or whatever you want to call it, you can actually move all of the widgets around, and you can manipulate them. You can close out the ones you don't like. Well, the same is true for WEBForms. Okay? It just takes one more step to get to it, and it's where I'll start. It's all the way on the right-hand side here. We do have a lock and unlock option. So if we go ahead and click that little lock, you notice a drop-down comes in, and this is what actually shows you everything that you can do with the dashboard, and also now gives you the freedom to manipulate and move around these widgets. Okay, so just lock and unlock over here. Okay, same as Matrix in the sense that if I even close one out, you'll notice here I have create transaction. Well, the one that's gray is referring to this one here, and if I close it out, it's just going to pop back up into this menu. Right, so if I get rid of everything on my screen, it will tell me that I can drag and drop the widgets that I want. And I've got some blue action buttons and a bunch of green lists and little previews that I can pull through. So if I was to, right, yours may have looked quite different than mine. If you have a whole bunch of these on your screen, I mean, it could end up looking very busy, right? And when you logged in, maybe it looked something a little bit more similar to that. Well, just for my own kind of preference, I typically like to keep my dashboard just really, really basic, really simple. So you did notice when we came in, I did have them pretty well all closed out. As we close them out, you can see they just pop right back into this menu. And I just kind of resized it a little bit. So with the fact that the lock is currently in its unlocked mode, right, I can move these around, manipulate them a little bit. And maybe do something a little bit more of how I wanted it to look on my dashboard, right? So being that right now, my whole idea is, hey, maybe in this case I was a little bit more used to the previous version of WEBForms, which is now called Legacy, and maybe I just want a create button and a list of my transactions. So just really simplified it, for example. But you can make this look however you want. You can have as many of those buttons, pull them down, have them on there, resize them, whatever your preference is for how it looks and everything. Okay. Since we're working on these little icons here on the right-hand side, next one here, I'm actually going to go right to left. And what I'm going to do is these two, I may as well do them together because they're very, very similar. We have a quick start and a how do I. Okay, so I'll do these two and then we'll talk about legacy right following that. But if we click on one of these options, okay, such as the quick start, you'll notice it does pop us into a separate tab to the side here. And the best way to kind of visualize what this is, I like to think of it as kind of like a table of contents in a textbook, right? If I'm looking for something, I'm going to find a specific topic. It's going to break down some other information about it, and then maybe it's going to give me some key points on how I could work with that. Well, just like that, right? You have a look, you see your introduction, you got your sections and your appendix towards the end type of thing. It pretty much is like an online textbook, let's call it. And if we make our way to a section such as section C, working with WEBForms, well, it would start to give us a whole bunch of common topics that come up, right? Is it working with forms? Am I working with transactions? right? Maybe in this case, I want to know a little bit more about transactions in general. It'll give me another list that comes down and now refined into kind of some more specific topics. Well, these are all very, very helpful resources that Kriya put together. If I was to even click on creating a transaction, right? Well, it'll be titled creating a transaction. It'll actually give us a step-by-step guide with visuals on exactly what will happen, right? Add, click the add button, title, right? Put a name. It'll explain everything even with visuals. So really, really a great resource here. Okay, one more thing you may notice is a lot of these have a quick little video. Kriya put in all these videos. They're all less than 5 minutes in length. Let's see here. I'll have to close this one here just so I can show you. And that's what the how do I is referring to. So quick start is going to be like step-by-step guides as you work through that table of contents. And then how do I is just video content. So very similar topics. But if you'd rather see a little webinar that's 5 minutes or an instructable that's more in a video form, you just click the how do I and it takes you to that section. Appendix C, right? Simple transaction and adding a form, and it would give me a quick little video I could watch with that content. This one looking like it's even just a minute and a half, for example. Okay. So two really, really good resources there. I'll go back to full screen here. There we go. Perfect. And now that we've kind of covered these three, very last one we have left is this legacy version. I'm just going to click on that at this point. There's going to be a little pop-up that comes up. It's going to tell us, hey, this version is the old, you're about to enter the old version of WebForms. Are you sure you want to go there? You're not going to be able to create any new content, that kind of stuff. Well, that's the case because they are eventually taking that old version of WebForms away. They just haven't given us a date on that just yet, on when that's going to be. I mean, with everything that happened with COVID and stuff like that, it was actually supposed to go away completely before all this happened, but luckily it's still available right now. As you can see, the situation is a little bit strange and everything, so they haven't locked anything down just yet, which is great. It gives you a little bit more time. If you have older transaction kits, definitely get to them as soon as possible. Save them to your computer in case there's information that you need from them. And I'll show you how to do that really quickly here. Okay. We had clicked on legacy version, if you remember, up near the top of the screen when we were on the newer version of WebForms. This one here is the old version of WebForms that we used to use, I guess, like last year, all the way up until last year kind of thing. So you'll notice if you are familiar with this one and you have used it, you'll have a list of transaction kits all in this list. I've just saved one kit for training purposes on here just to show you. And you can jump in, you can view them, you can have a look at the content that's there, you can copy over clauses if you'd like, all that kind of stuff. You just can't create a brand new one. It's only in read-only mode so that you could save content and look at your content. You just can't make anything new on it. Okay. I find that the very best way, if you are looking to save information and archive it, is 100% downloading it to your computer. Okay. Every single transaction kit here, towards the right side under Actions, has this little icon here with the arrow pointing at, I guess, what looks like a computer that's laying down. This is your download button. So if you were to just click on them, one at a time and just quickly do the download here, it allows you to see which types of forms you do have attached, right? Maybe a good portion of these are completely empty and I already know, or maybe there's not really relevant information in there. A hard drive, there we go. Sri, I think you're onto something there. Downloading it onto your hard drive, that's a lot better. A laying down computer. So we've got just the agreement of purchase and sale, for example. Maybe this is the one that I know I have some customer information that I want to archive or some clauses. Well, maybe I'll just keep this one checked off, and I could decide if I want it to be read-only or editable. I think I'll always really go for editable just in case. I mean, why not? It allows me to, if I want to use Adobe down the road and maybe make changes to it or add some new information to it, well, you could do that using some programs and manipulate it. So I just go with editable PDF, and it just kind of pops up here, right? It goes right to your downloads folder, and then you can, on your own computer, just put it into whatever folder you're using to kind of manage these, right? So if you just downloaded them all, the ones that you think are relevant, really, I mean, when you have the chance, you can do a bit of cleaning in here, pick the ones that you like, if there is some important information. But it is like just like this, right? Downloading it right to your computer, and then you'll have access to it as a PDF that you can edit in the future. Okay. I'm just going to make my way back now just to the other newer WebForms version that we're going to be working on. And to do that, it's just at the top of the screen here. Switch to WebForms 2019. So WebForms 2019, I know we're in 2020, but that's just the name that they attributed to that new WebForms that we're using. Okay, so here we are. Now we're back where we started on our dashboard inside of the new WebForms. Okay, and that does kind of wrap up what we have here. The reason why I believe it's much better to download these transaction kits to your computer is just because since you're bringing them in the form of a PDF, something to understand for Korea WebForms here is you're not able to make changes to a PDF just like right there, right on, like in documents, for example. We'll say a couple words about that in a moment. Well, I can't open a PDF and edit it inside of WebForms, but sometimes I could do that in something like Authentisign or inside of DocuSign, and definitely from time to time inside of, like, if I have an Adobe program that allows me to make changes. So it's always going to be better to just do an editable PDF, save it to your computer, and you can manipulate it however you want that way. That's the best way to archive it, I'd say. But that's perfect. Wraps up our top right-hand side here. Where we're going to end up going at this point is, as I mentioned, we'll make our way down this list, talk about some of the key points. You may have noticed me already clicking on this option. So there's a bit of like a little 3-line menu here. I don't know if you want to call it like a sandwich or something like that. When you click on this, and you'll notice it popping up in different screens, sometimes on the right-hand side. We'll talk about that when we get to transactions, and sometimes on the left-hand side here. But it just gives you a description of what these icons are referring to. All right. So when it comes to transactions, right, we know already what our transactions list looks like because on our dashboard, we chose to have a glimpse into that information. If I was to click on transactions, for example, well, it would look very similar. It's just a little bit more detailed of a list, since this one is kind of where the transactions are housed. The one on my dashboard, again, is just a little snippet into that information. We can see a lot more about the transaction itself, such as the modified date, right? Things to get familiar with that are going to show up later in WebForms as well is things like when you select different options, right? Selecting different options, they end up being batched and grouped inside of this basket, for example. So keep that in mind. That is going to come up later on for sure when we go to add forms or add clauses. This is something very common that's going to come up on different and various screens that we use. Another thing commonly overlooked, and sometimes I do get some questions on this one, there is a 3-dot menu. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 any street, for example, right? Well, maybe I'm not sure how to kind of manipulate this one right at this point, but if I click on this menu, it may give me a whole bunch of additional options that refer to it. Okay, maybe in this case, I wanted to delete this transaction. Well, I can select it, right, but how do I action it to actually get rid of it? Well, could do that from either entering in the transaction and manipulating it. Perhaps I'll do it right from my basket so we can see what that looks like. The only thing selected right now is 1, 2, 3 any street, and we can go ahead and delete it. Are you sure? Yes. And now, perfect, it's been successfully deleted, for example. Okay, so just getting familiar with kind of the selection process and how this basket actually reacts. And of course, if we were looking to create a brand new one, may not be completely apparent at first, but it is from this add button. When you hover over, it shows you that when you click on this plus symbol, that's how you create a brand new transaction. When it comes to Authentisign, our very next item on the list here, I'm going to skip past this one because it really does relate to the App Store and all of the rest of the third-party or signing options and DocuSign, next one, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to skip past that. We'll talk about it as soon as App Store comes up. A couple of very straightforward ones here. You can select forms if you're looking to have a look through what is available on the system. Something that's going to be pretty important to get familiar with on WEBForms is the idea that everything that they've organized in here, as you see here, they're in the shape of folders. So you kind of have to picture it like they're folders on your computer, right? You go to your documents, and then you go into your pictures folder, or like whatever the case may be, to look for the information you're looking for. Very, very similar, right? These little folders. If I go into the OMDREB folder, I would expect to see all the Ontario Real Estate Association standard forms. And they put them in order of the number, for example. So 100, and if I went all the way down the list, they'd be like in the 800s, 900s kind of thing. But all of the standard forms are right here in their respective folders, right? If I wanted the FinTrack forms, I can go get them right in this folder, have a look at what they are. Okay. The next few on the list here, okay, I'd say the next 4 are very much like bells and whistles. These are additional things that you don't have to make use of these utilities, but they're like extra, and if they apply to the way that you operate your business, well, maybe they end up being helpful, that kind of thing. But these are very optional. Okay, from documents, tasks, faxing, and contacts. So I'll only say a few words about each of them. In your documents folder, what this is basically CREA has given a little section where you can store information. So if you you basically get to create, right, your own folder and save information to it. So I've got one here, Eric's training resources, for example, and I've just pulled in a couple of things from my computer just for training purposes so I could show what it looks like. But realistically, it's just like cloud storage, and there's no limit to what you can save in here. They haven't said like, hey, it's not like a 5 GB maximum with all your files added together. It's just seems to be unlimited from what I understand. But you can put a various amount of different file types. Okay, so you'll notice here, 2020 training dates is an XLS. So I have like an Excel file that's saved here, right? The MLS map is a PNG, that's an image. I'll wait for it to load, for example, so we can see what's there, but I just have like a little image here that I was working on and I saved it. Same thing with a JPEG, right? This one's just a Word document, but you have a range of, it doesn't allow you to do every single file type. However, there is a range of files you can save. And what this means is if I log on to a different computer, right? Maybe I have a computer at the office and another computer at a home office. Well, I wouldn't have to bring like a USB stick in between the 2 locations. I can just pull on like a Schedule B or like a document from a lawyer that I want to attach or some branding. Well, I could drop them in this documents folder, and then at any location that I'm working, I can pull those into transactions if applicable, for example. Okay, so that's your documents. Same thing though, you would end up just kind of creating your own folder, naming it, and you could start dragging in documents and information as you add them in, right? So add new document, add new folder, all that kind of stuff. This next one here, tasks. This one really is like a glorified reminders app. So you'll notice I did put some silly names in here, but this really is like, it's just a utility. If you happen to be working as part of a team, for example, well, maybe that using tasks is like one way that you can maybe just stay up to date with your other team members, for example. If I was to create a task and name it MLS information, or if I named it clauses and then I pulled in a coworker like Brian and said, hey, Brian, by 12 o'clock, can you put in some those, I really like the clauses you had on that other form. Can you bring them into this transaction by 12 o'clock? And then you would see, right, your team member completing that. You see the status and stuff like that. It's just like a little reminders app that's built in, and it could work in between, and you could share transactions and different tasks and things between yourself and another team member. So really just like little reminders. Okay. I have a question here in the chat. Is there a size limit to the documents? I have to imagine that there is. As I mentioned, it's not 100% of all the available file types. Let me see here. If I was to, let me see what I can track down on my computer here really quickly. If I was to try and add one on, for example, that it didn't accept, I find that that's kind of the best way to find out its limits. So if I was to add a new document, drag or drop files, or click here to upload, right? Maybe I'll bring in this webinar slide. Well, I know that this is a PowerPoint file. It's the PowerPoint file that I have open right here, right? Well, when you bring one in that is not allowed, it will tell you what is allowed by default. So you can do doc, docx, XLS, right? So Word documents, Excel files, different types of images, only GIF, so very, very short, small sized video. I don't see anything on here that says like MP4 or anything like that. And just by nature of the files that are available here, none of these take up a large amount of room. So I don't have an answer to like exactly what's the maximum. As you can see, the one I pulled in was 0.3 megabytes. I tried to pull in this PowerPoint file and it did not accept it. But from the list of allowable file types, I can't imagine a GIF being more than, right, can't be more than like 10 megabytes or something. So if it accepts it, right, like if I dropped an MP4 and it was like a video that was like 20 minutes long and it was like 100 megabytes, well, it won't let me do an MP4 anyways. So I don't know what the limitations are. But typically like a doc, a Word document won't be an overly large file size, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen it like reject any of the ones that I tried to do. Like even if it was like a 20-page document or like a 30-page instructable, I believe it will still accept it. But it may come down to a little bit of testing on that one tree. All right. With that, had just finished explaining tasks a little bit as well. Really just a reminders app here. Okay. Next up, we have a maybe one that is a little bit silly to have, but it is, again, very optional, faxing. Okay. And the reason why it's here is because by being powered by Lone Wolf and Transaction Desk here, believe it or not, this is actually the platform and the utility that's used coast to coast most frequently right now in the United States for real estate transactions as well. So apparently they use faxing a lot. It looks like we have adapted AuthentiSign and like DocuSign, all these signing partners maybe a little more quickly, but you do have like an online e-faxing service that you can use on here. Just totally optional. If it doesn't apply to your business, just skip right to the next kind of thing. But you do have that option. Then we have one named Contacts here. Okay, just go back to the full screen. And for Contacts, as you see, the only thing that I have in here right now is Seller Lawyer. My reason for that is, and this could be totally different for yourself, once you get, start working on different transactions and get familiar with it and everything, decide for yourself. But I find that if I am entering information to put a contact and spending the time to put their information, such as, their address, their details, phone number, contact information. Well, I'm going to make sure that it's somebody that I use on a transaction more often than once, for example. Right? I wouldn't take the time to add in and create a contact for just the seller. Like maybe I'm a buyer representation in this case. Well, I'm probably not going to create one for um, right putting in all that information so I have it for later. If it's just someone that's going to be on a transaction once in a blue moon, for example. If I do something like my lawyer that always represents me, every time that I do a sale, I'll take the time to create a contact for them so that it's very quick when I go to transact. If I'm using them really often, I'll create a contact, for example. You'll see when you work with transactions if that's kind of your opinion on it as well. However, if you like to have all of your contacts on here, you can pull them in all at once. It's something that the utility is, you can only do it by doing the import from Google. So as you can see, I just have the one contact here. I can either create a new contact or I can add contacts from Google. If I click this option, it would be like every single contact that's attached to my Gmail or my Google profile, for example. So if you have them all on Hotmail or on a different managing service for all of your contacts, you may have to just transfer them to Google really quick. It should just be a couple steps, and then you would just click on transfer from Google. They can all come in from your Gmail or your Google account, and you'd have your whole contacts list in here, if that's your preference. Still though, I find that this is much better used when you just focus on the ones that you're gonna use on multiple transactions. Totally up to you how you use it though. This is a really optional kind of place where you can store information as well, just kind of contact information. The next up that we have is setup. Okay, so in the setup, I'm not gonna spend too much time in here, but this is a really good place where you definitely want to jump into the setup and get familiar with some of these options. In the setup, you have a lot of different notable items that pop up that are going to create the groundwork and really save you some time when you approach WEBForms. Okay, so things like going in and checking your preferences, right? Making sure that you like the email that's on file, because that's the email that's going to pull into your Authentisign and things like that, right? Maybe program settings, going in and looking at the different things that apply to like a form, for example. I know we haven't gotten to a form just yet, but if like a form is going to have a specific look, maybe I can manipulate that a little bit and make it easier to manage. So I was in the setup, I clicked on program settings, and if I was to click on form settings, right, there's a whole list of all the different things I can manipulate, right? If I click this little arrow or the title, it'll drop down the form settings. Perhaps the default font that shows up, maybe I don't like it very much and I want to go to Times New Roman Bold, and my default font, maybe I like it to be a 12 or something. Well, you're going to be able to manipulate things very, very specifically in your program settings, and that all stems from the setup itself, right? Setup, program settings. Another really important one here that you're going to lay down some groundwork in is clauses. This is where your clauses are hiding if you haven't created any personal ones yet. So if I click on clauses, for example, remember that's setup and then clauses, well, you can see personal, office, and system clauses. My personal clauses, of course, are anything that I create myself. Maybe my lawyer set up some new COVID clauses and I want to add them in so they're easy to just kind of find and add into different transactions. Well, I would go into personal clauses and I would start to add them in and create those clauses. Office clauses, right? This one is just if at the brokerage level, if your brokerage is sharing different clauses with everybody in the brokerage. I don't have any, OMDREB hasn't created any for me to test with or anything like that, but that's at the administrator level for your brokerage. And then system clauses are all the standard ones that you would expect to see, right? If I go to English, now same thing, a big list of folders, all the different topics. I can see something like deposits, further sum of, and we can have a look at the clauses that are in here, start choosing the ones that we want, for example, when we go to bring them into forms. But when you're going to create your personal clauses, that's the important thing to take from this. It is in your setup. You click on clauses, and then you create your personal clauses in your folder. Okay. Final thing that I'll say a quick sentence about is transaction templates. This is a really, really important section where it's a little bit more advanced. Once you're familiar with transactions, formatting, that kind of thing, well, you will eventually start to add transaction templates. You may even have some templates shared through from your brokerage, depending on what they are sending to all of their, all the members of the brokerage. But a transaction template would be basically like a cookie cutter that already has a lot of steps in place if you're approaching transactions a specific way. Like if I know I'm making a residential offer and it looks very similar and I'm using a very similar set of clauses every time that I make a residential offer, well, it would be worth creating a template so it already has my clauses ready to go, all that kind of stuff. Okay? But that happens here in the setup. So you go to setup, transaction templates, and you can create that. I will also tell you where you can get some more training on that if you're looking to watch, much like this, a live webinar that focuses more on transaction templates. It's something that Kriya has been offering for a couple of months, and you might be able to jump into one next week kind of thing. I'll show you where to get that near the end of the session as well, in case it applies. So that does wrap up kind of what I had in mind for setup here, but definitely get familiar with some of the options in here, because they will, in fact, end up saving you a lot of time. But it does take a little bit of kind of going in and being a little curious on what stuff you can manipulate. Happens in the setup, though. Which now brings us to one of our final options on the left here, which is App Store. As I mentioned earlier, App Store is going to bring in this Authentisign. That'll all be explained here. Well, first thing to mention is that Authentisign and an Authentisign license is something that very recently, within the last couple of months, has been attached to all realtors' Kriya WEBForms accounts for everyone in Ontario. Okay, that's something at the Kriya level, if I'm not mistaken, that they decided to go with. As this is powered by Lone Wolf Technologies, well, Lone Wolf in effect ended up acquiring Authentisign. They purchased the company and they decided to make Authentisign an included license as part of this new transaction desk and Kriya WEBForms. So all of the real estate agents in Ontario are reaping the benefits of this. If you have an already active Authentisign you're paying for, maybe look into that a little bit. You do have one available right inside of your Kriya WEBForms, and you could see if it has enough features that apply for you. Okay. But in this App Store, much like how I'm talking about Authentisign here, this is where you go to attach third-party signing options. So Authentisign, DocuSign, right? All of these different ones. If I click on App Store, you'll notice that for DocuSign, I have unlink. For next one, I have link. That just means that I've already attached a DocuSign account, so I don't need to do it a second time. If I go to transact and send through a form and it's ready for signing, well, at that point, it'll let me know that I can either send it to Authentisign because of the account that's attached, or DocuSign because I have one attached as well, for example. I could choose one or the other when we get to that point because I could see that it's already been linked. If I wanted to link a Next One account, maybe my brokerage that I join, 3 months from now, they have a Next One account for all members. Well, when I have those credentials, maybe I'll click link and go and check it out, for example. Okay, but you can, a lot of these have like free trials, and if you want to get familiar with one, that is actually what happened here with DocuSign. It was a 30-day free trial. I just clicked link, started the free trial, and had like 30 days to see what it's about, for example. But you definitely want to get familiar with them and make that decision for yourself if you prefer one versus the other. So it really, really does wrap up kind of everything here. I mean, the only extra thing to mention about Authentisign is, again, because they acquired it and it's their product, they decided to put a little pen here with Authentisign. I mean, really, that's the only difference. If I link my DocuSign, I'm not going to get a pen underneath that says DocuSign, right? Authentisign is just integrated, so they put a menu option where you can go straight to your Authentisign, for example, and see the transactions that are in there, or the ones that you've used, or that went to signing, that kind of thing. Where when I click on DocuSign, maybe it'll open, right, a second tab, and I could see them there. They just made this one so it's built in because it's their product, so they included it, for example. Okay. Very last thing here, really just the support option, okay, where you're going to find on yours, you may have a little bit of a contact form, gives you some information about other resources, as well how to reach them for assistance. Okay. So at this point, we're definitely going to be jumping into a transaction. We ended up doing a good kind of thorough look through this main dashboard and also a bunch of the menu options here from the left. So let's absolutely create a transaction because we want to get an idea of the formatting when we go to add clauses to a form. If you remember, because we put this transaction button on our main screen, I can either go right here and do it. You can go to transactions first and click the add button. Both will do the exact same thing. We're just creating a new transaction from scratch. So if I was to click create transaction, okay, we will get a pop-up much like the one that we saw when we were in the table of contents. If you remember, the one I clicked on was, hey, how do you create a transaction? Right, well, this little pop-up, things to note, whenever you create something new, a lot of times on web forms, the only requirement usually is just that you name it. So in this case, it's the only thing with an asterisk, right? Naming it is what it's requiring. The rest by default ends up being totally optional. And that's what we'll do. We'll go with that really standard name that we had for our previous one that we just deleted, for example, 123 Any Street for training reasons. Okay, and the rest of it, as I mentioned, was optional. We're going to end up leaving it blank, but I'll say a couple words here. So if I was to choose a type, you're more than welcome to. However, it's just, this isn't going to affect the transaction itself. This is really just a sorting option for yourself, right? If I had this as a residential sale and I wanted to find all of my residential sales down the road, well, this is just for your own sorting on your account. So I'll leave that blank. Don't need to choose one at this point. If I was looking to import some data from an MLS system, well, it would require me to select the correct one that I'm pulling from, right? If it was a 308 number or 307 number from Oakville that pulls from the Ortis MLS system, well, I would choose Oakville, right? If it was started with like a T or a W and it was like, or C, and it was a Toronto listing, Central, East, West, that kind of thing, right? Well, I would have to choose Toronto if I was pulling it from there instead. And same thing goes for the other boards and associations, for example. Okay. But in this case, we're going to leave it blank. We're not looking to pull any information. It does allow you to import that data, though, if you need to. Okay. Finally, if you would like to be added on in this transaction, right, to pull in some of the information that's in your profile, right? For myself, it just says Eric, Oakville Milton District Real Estate Board. It's not going to pull in like brokerage information. I just work at the board. But for yourself, maybe you have some default information that you like and you want to be the listing salesperson. Well, you can select that just to save a bit of time. I'm just going to go in as neither. Again, we're just keeping everything blank. And our last one is the wizard. This option may seem a little bit daunting at first, but I will definitely explain it in a few minutes. It is very straightforward, and you'll see that really all the wizard is doing, it's just a fancy word for like structuring how the transaction looks as you work through it. And I'll explain that in a couple minutes, but I'm just going to uncheck it. We're just looking to name it and leave everything else blank. We're going to hit create. New transaction created. Okay. Now we are on the landing page for an actual transaction. Everything we do from this screen and this point on is referring to 123 Any Street, the new transaction that we've started. Okay? One thing that's important to note, if you remember from earlier, right? Oh, I keep clicking on that, sorry. One thing that's important to note is the little sandwich or 3-line menu here on the left, right? Remember I said when we were working on a transaction, it's gonna come relevant that there will be one on the right-hand side as well, right? So now I have one on either side. And they actually do refer to kind of two different things, okay? Really important to understand that the one on the left is still referring to everything that has to do with the broader picture of your profile, right? Your whole WebForms account, pardon me. So if I open this up, right, I know that if I click on setup, it's going to be the setup for my whole WebForms. So the options on the left really do apply to like more general, larger account decisions, okay? The one on this right-hand side that's newer right now, newer because it just refers to this 123 Any Street. It gives me manipulation options and menu options that only refer to this particular transaction, right? Everything that happens on this right-hand side is just in relation to this transaction 123 Any Street. So really important to note, right? If I clicked on my dashboard on the left, it would take me to my actual dashboard that had create transaction, a list of my transactions, right? But if I click on this dashboard, just important to understand, it's actually a dashboard for 123 Any Street. Because if you think about a transaction, it's going to have contacts, forms, documents, a whole bunch of information is going to be attached to 123 Any Street by the time I'm done working on it. Well, the dashboard is just going to be giving me a glimpse at that information, right? If I click the dashboard, you'll notice it really is just right now it's totally blank because it's just referring to the forms that are attached to 123 Any Street. We haven't attached any yet, so understandably, it's totally empty, okay? So all these menu options just refer to our transaction at hand. Something that's really important to understand is you can take any direction that you want with this. If I want to go to my forms section and I want to add an agreement of purchase and sale, for example, right? I can do that at any point. I can jump to my contacts and I could pull in information, right? Maybe I want to add an existing contact like the seller lawyer that we have in our contacts list, right? Well, just all of this can be navigated in any direction, right? You're not stuck doing your contacts first and then your documents second, and like it's like a free flow of information. You could jump to any place that you want and tackle that one first and then move on to whatever step that you want to take second. That's where the wizard is just a little bit different. So I'll explain the wizard at this point, okay? It starts a little bit with some more information about the details screen. So I'll just start there and then I'll activate the wizard. So if we click on details, you'll remember this was the landing page right after we hit the create button. It put us on the details page. Well, what this page does is this page is what distributes information to your forms. Okay? If I typed in 123 Any Street in these sections, well, this details form is the one that distributes those fields to my forms, right? If I type something here and then I added an agreement of purchase and sale, well, when I go to look at that agreement of purchase and sale, if it has a street number field and a street name field and a city field, well, my form is already going to have that ready to go. It'll pull through to that form. So this is a distribution form that sends information to all of the forms that you end up adding in effect. Okay. If we have a look through here, right? We don't have any information so far because we didn't pull anything from the MLS system, but we see, right, all this address, property information, listing information, the price, the different contractual dates, expiry, right, all this stuff, closing date. This is all part of what will be distributed. If the contract date shows up on a particular form, well, if I entered it here, we would expect it to go to that form when it's ready, okay? If I activate the wizard at this point, right, all it's going to do, you'll notice this section is going to change a little bit because the wizard is just going to structure the way that the information is presented when we approach the transaction. And that is all. It just takes, right, now the wizard is active. It's just going to give us a 5-step approach when we go to create a transaction. And you can activate the wizard at any time, just like I've done here. Step 1 is details. If you remember, when we weren't using the wizard, the detail screen was our landing page, right? Well, that's step 1 of 5. If we filled out some details in this distribution form, well, they're just recommending, hey, do that first. When you go next, you'll deal with the bottom part of that distribution form, which is the transaction dates, if you remember, right? And then we move to the next one, right? Be something like forms or contacts, right? Each one is, it's just more of a linear approach, saying, hey, you know what, tackle the contacts right now as step 3, add them in, do your forms next, add on your agreement of purchase and sale, your buyer rep, whatever the case may be. That's step 4, and then step 5 is if you have any documents. Maybe there's a schedule that you want to attach, that kind of stuff. And when you're done, you hit done, and it sends you to your dashboard, okay? Now I'm on the dashboard. As soon as you've completed that process, which is the 5 steps, right? It brings us here, but we could still go right back to what we were doing before. Right to the detail stream, for example, it'll look the same once again. Once you're completed the 5 steps, like you can activate the wizard again at any point, but just understand the wizard isn't really changing anything in effect. It's just structuring which things you approach first, second, third, fourth, fifth kind of thing. Okay? My forms section looks exactly the same as step 4, right? If 4 out of 5 in the wizard is forms, well, I can click forms and I can click add a form. That's going to be the exact same as doing step 4 in the wizard. So I just want you to understand, you can go any direction you want. You can start with forms, you can do details second, you can do documents first if you wanted, right? Like any order you want is open. The wizard just structures it if you prefer that option. And that's really all the wizard is. It just structures the 5 steps. Okay. Let's definitely add on an agreement of purchase and sale here. We definitely have a few words to say about the formatting and adding clauses. So we'll add it on. Okay, as we mentioned, it is going to be a very standard form that we're going to add. And we're going to track it down by going in this ARIA folder. Okay, we can either click on the folder as we saw before and just select the very general form 100 here and basically just add it on. Okay, our other way of finding the form is if we know information about it, such as a keyword in the title, maybe we know the number associated to that form, such as 100, well, we might be able to just pop it into the search and it'll give us everything that refers to it. Well, here we have the agreement of purchase and sale from the ARIA folder, right? Maybe that's the one that we want and we can add it on. Same would go if we put in a keyword instead, right? Something like purchase and sale, well, it would come up as well. It does keywords, part of the number, however you want to search for it, right? If I already knew which 5 forms I needed, after working with them for a little while, I know I want an 810, a 310, right? If I knew all the numbers, well, I could just put them in very quickly once you're familiar with them and just kind of working with a realtor. That's the one I wanted, for example, right? But for now, right, you would kind of just go to the folder, get familiar with what's in the folder, and then just add on the form that you'd like. This same search is going to apply when we add clauses as well. But let's go ahead and just add on this agreement of purchase and sale. Okay. At this point, right, the form is totally blank. We're looking to go in and add some information, more notably some clauses. So let's open that up here. Okay. One thing I would absolutely suggest is getting familiar with the icons on the form a little bit. Like, don't be afraid to use them, navigate, see what they do, right? You'll notice that there is a file menu, much like the file menu in a Word document that you might be familiar with. Well, at any point, you can go File, Print, right? I can go File, Exit. I'm in the form right now. If I click Exit, it's just going to take me one step back. If you remember, we were on the form screen, right? I can go right back in, type of thing. So you have some navigation options, some manipulation options, right? Some things that you can edit, such as the color of the fonts, things like that. So some things that should be pretty familiar as you work through. Just have a quick peek. We have a navigation. We could jump all the way to page 6 by hovering and going to the last page, which is going to be our Schedule A, of course, right? Manipulation options to get used to, and also our little pen here, which when we're ready is actually the one that's going to allow us to send to a third party, right? If you only have Authentisign, it'll just use that option. If you have more than one, in this case I have 2, every time that I do a signing, I could choose which one I prefer to use at that point. Okay. But this should look really similar. I'm actually going to zoom out a tiny bit so you can see the edges on both sides of the form here. But you're going to be able to go through and make your changes, right? I could absolutely type in any of these fields. The one more notably that we want to work with, though, of course, is, as I mentioned, we just want to add some clauses and see the formatting as kind of a final thing to end off the session. And it is something that's actually just going to happen on page 6. Right? I'm not going to enter any kind of silly details here. That's something that, of course, you take your time with, and you definitely would know how to fill it out. Let's look at the clauses, however. So if we go to page 6, you'll notice we have some more fields that we can type in as we finish this part of the form. And then we have this big blank section on our Schedule A. Well, that's something that I know this is a really, really kind of straightforward step. But if I click on my clause button, which is right here, right, the third option from my menu, I select it, it's going to give me a pop-up right now. It's not letting me move on. A multi-line text box needs to be selected before you can add a clause. Hopefully everybody can see that. It's not coming through too small there. But all that it's trying to tell me is that I have to click in that blank area just before I could proceed. I know it's a silly step, but definitely want to know that that's there, right? If I zoom in a little bit just to show you, you'll see it. You really do have like a little green highlight that comes in on this section when you go and actually kind of click on it, right? Let me go back to page 6. Sorry, I was trying to zoom in and out to find the best way to show you both edges here. There we go. So we could still see both edges of the actual section. I know, right? There should be a permanent border. It would be easier to see. It's almost like, it seems like there's nothing there right now, but just know that it is absolutely there, okay? And as soon as you select that, right, this one is just a single line text box. This is a multi-line text box. I can't put a clause in this box, but I could put a clause in here. I know it's a little bit silly. You do have to select where the clauses are going first before you can start entering them. And it was just really in that big white section, okay? They have mentioned on the website that they're making the whole user access, like the user familiarity and like the way that you interact with forms, they're trying to make it more user friendly, but that's going to be over time, and hopefully it's something that they include. But for now, you do have to kind of just select that box before you can continue with your clauses. As far as clauses in general, if you remember, I don't have any personal or office clauses, so for sure we're going to get our clauses from the system section that we saw previously as well. Going to English, right? If you remember when we were in the setup, we did go to setup clauses and we saw the deposit clauses. Well, I might throw one in at this point. It's also a really good time that I'll show you a little more about the basket as well. As you can see, we just selected one option. We can see it in our basket. So I'll just start it with a really standard clause here. If you ever want to view them before adding them, you can kind of just click on them and see a preview. For my next clauses, I'm just going to go very, very standard. I'm going to go with some wordy environmental clauses. What I'm trying to accomplish here with this form is actually to go beyond what can fit in that white box so that it prompts for additional pages. Okay, and that's what I've done here by selecting a bunch of environmental clauses. We know these are overly wordy, right? And I absolutely am going to go right through the max characters for this page if I select a couple of these. Okay. In looking at the basket, we can see all 5 that are actually in there, for example. 1 deposit clause followed by 4 environmental clauses. And if we clicked OK, it would action everything in the basket all at once. Okay, so we'll click that now. It is now telling me, do you want to confirm this? You have hit the max character limit on this field. Would you like additional pages? Yes, absolutely. At this point, we want the extra page. Let's just wait for that to load. When it's finished, it's actually going to pop us down to that new page, page 7. So at this point, I would assume it's finished loading. But here are the parts that we definitely want to address right away and talk about. Looks like the start of our clause is the letter Y. So that can't be right. Right? So there's definitely some formatting to be addressed. If we look at this now, if you remember we had 6 pages, we now have an additional 7th page. If at any point I wanted more pages, I could always add or remove, for example, from this top right. But for now, just going to go up and have a look at what we're working with here. Okay, so we have our deposit clause, starting with some of our environmental clauses here. And we're going to quickly notice that there's also a scrolling option that's part of this right now. That's what we really want to address right before we conclude here. Really important that we get rid of this scroll option. There's a portion here, starting with this offer is conditional upon and going all the way to this AN hyphen, which is definitely where that letter Y came from at the bottom. Right, we're going to group those together in a moment. But if you notice, this whole section doesn't really seem to fit on my form, right? There's a little scroll here. Well, what'll happen is I can send through this form right now at this point. I can send it through to Authentisign if I wanted. I can send it by email. I can send it to my printer. What'll happen though is physically, the letters can't fit in this box. There's a scroll option for it. So what'll happen is, to account for that, it may compress the size of the font a little bit, right? If I send it right now without addressing this, maybe right now it's a size 9 font, maybe it'll drop to a size 8 so that it all fits on the page. So definitely you need to address just that portion here that's coming through. Right? I could see how far it goes to the bottom of the scroll. That's the top of it, that's the bottom of it. So I would basically just kind of cut and paste onto my next page. So if I cut this information, right, I'm going to go down to this one, select my multi-line text box, and paste it in. Well, now I am much more, looks much more organized instead of being cut off halfway through the word. Let me see here. Just kind of join these back up so that we can complete the word. Doesn't need the hyphen or anything like that. And now we have the completed clause. This was the 5th clause that we selected, which is one of those environmental clauses. Starting from the beginning of it, and we can see the entire clause now, which is a lot better. And if we go back and look at what we've done, we still have a tiny little scroll bar, and the whole reason for that is just that last line. As soon as we take that away, for example, right, we'll notice that when we click inside and outside of this box now, the scroll option is gone, and that's what the important part is. I know from this point now that all this information is going to fit. It's not going to have any issues. If I start to add information, however, right, that's the part that is, unfortunately, it's a little bit silly. In my mind, when I'm working with something like, a Word document, right? We're just kind of expected. We're used to just hitting enter and we would eventually be on the next page. That's just not the case for this form right now. So just bear in mind a little bit of formatting here. Okay? The good news is you may only have to do this once because, right, you're going to end up creating this in a template. Maybe this is my very specific set of clauses. Whenever I approach a residential offer, well, I might make it look a little bit different, make it so it's a little bit easier to see where I know I need to enter information, for example. And I would only have to address this formatting the one time that I'm building that template. Okay. So if there are any questions about the formatting, definitely please let me know and I'll clarify a little bit more on that. But we have addressed it in this case, and it won't, like if I send this to a printer, it'll send exactly what fits. It's not going to shrink it anymore, where if I had this extra bit of space, it might kind of compress it a little bit. So just really important to understand that. But you can get rid of it by erasing and making sure that it fits, as we don't see a scroll option right now when we kind of toggle in between the side, for example. But at this point, right, we have now the good flowing information, we have the additional page that came through when we added clauses, everything kind of working well how we expect of it. And maybe at this point it is, the time that I would be sending it to a signing partner. Well, you can do that just by clicking on the pen, as you saw, should pop up at the top part of your screen. And we are now in this Authentisign screen where we can start to assign participants, right? Attach any additional documentation if there was a Schedule B type of thing, survey or like whatever you wanted to have included with this deal. And right, you would design the signings. Where is every person kind of signing, dated, all that kind of stuff. And you could do that right inside of here since we're working inside of Authentisign. As you notice, it didn't put us into a new tab, like what would happen if I clicked on DocuSign, because it's integrated. So you can see it all kind of goes from start to finish. You can even do your signing and have it started so it goes out to everybody's email that is a participant. Okay. So at this point, I know I blew past the 2 p.m. mark here, and I do apologize. Some of these I end up going pretty thorough, and I didn't want to speed up or kind of miss any information. But really, really, really in quick review here, again, just remember the direction that we kind of took for this session. Very basic approach at first, understanding the dashboard, the different icons and utilities that you have, you can manipulate it. We went down the list and kind of couple of key points about the different options that you have, some of the bells and whistles, understanding how to link a third-party signing option, the fact that there is some background information you want to look into in your setup. Then we jumped into an actual transaction. We named it 123 Any Street, and we started to tackle the formatting and understand how these navigation options comes into play. Right now that we have a form attached to our 123 Any Street, well, our dashboard is starting to show some information. We can see that form, right? As we continue to add different information, forms, things to this transaction, well, we would notice this dashboard starting to fill up. Okay. So with that and with the basic introduction, that is everything that I was looking to cover on today's session. I'm just going to close this up here, and what I want to show you at this point is two different resources. Okay, this being a very, very basic approach and start to WEBForms. What you have as kind of something you can leap into from here is, as I mentioned at the start, Kriya is putting on some next steps and some different topics in the form of webinars. And I'll show you how to access that. So I've saved it here as one of my bookmarks, Kriya WebForms e-learning. If I click on that, and I'll copy the link in the chat so everyone has it, I'll just wait for it to load here. It does make you go through kind of RealtorLink and stuff, So I'll just wait for that to load. Just going to select this and I will copy it. Okay, let me just type in okay, there we go. So I just pasted that in. Feel free to click on that link if it interests you. Save it as a bookmark if you'd like, or save it somewhere because it is kind of a tough one to write from scratch, HTTP, all that kind of stuff. But where that link takes you is right here, right? If I was to paste it in, right, the one I put in the chat, when you go to this website, it is the WEBForms e-learning page where you can find Kriya's recorded webinars, their scheduled webinars, right? If I was to register, these are available for all Kriya members, which all of you undoubtedly are Kriya members. If you click on register, right, I'd be able to see the schedule and all the upcoming topics, such as creating your personal templates in WEBForms, right? Lynn St. Germain is an incredible instructor. If you jump into one of these, you're likely to see a webinar that she's putting on, right? And it'll show you that the next one is, in fact, tomorrow. So let's find some details. I mean, even if you wanted to, you can jump in at 11:30 tomorrow morning and maybe register and see a little webinar on templates and get some more information on that. So definitely a link to copy in and keep saved on your computer. If I was to go back, right, there's an overview one, templates, and another one about checklists. So right now they're kind of running 3 different webinar topics. If you're looking for more WEBForms content, this is a very, very good next place to look. As always, I did record the session for today, and these webinars are uploaded to our video training bank. Okay, so if I was to show you here, when you are on Matrix on your main home page with your widgets, if you just make your way to your external links widget, anything that has to do with the members area for OMDREB, if you click here, right, takes you to your members area. You're logged in as Eric in this case. Well, on the left, where you see all your dues information, towards the bottom, there's a video training bank. Here's where you will find everything that we've uploaded, such as the WEBForms basic introduction. So like today's session, right, these we do kind of putting in some updates to them and putting in the newer ones, but you can absolutely look at one of the ones we've recorded and uploaded. You can watch these at your own leisure. These are the topics that we've been rotating. And you can even see a whole range of events that were put on with keynote speakers in webinars that our events department reached out to. Anyone that allows us to record the session ends up going in and being posted on this video training bank.